Today's guest is Jay Singh, founder of Casper Studios. It's an AI product studio helping companies move fast and move past demoing of AI products and into real workflows and business outcomes. I was really interested in talking to Jay primarily because he's not just talking about AI. He actually went from LinkedIn biz dev and partnerships into building a studio that works with major brands, startups, creators on actual AI products. Reportedly, Casper's working with brands across things like Pepsi, Netflix, private equity firms, hedge funds, healthcare providers, and they've been in the weeds on everything from voice AI all the way through to enterprise AI implementation. We'll talk today about things like AI native building, how do you decide what to build, how to avoid demo theater, and how a non-technical founder or builder can actually ship AI products. Jay, welcome to Just Build It. Thank you for being here.
Thanks for having me, Glenn.
Awesome. Well, just to get things started, I know I kind of riffed a little bit there on where you are coming from, but take me back to the beginning just of Casper to give people context here. How did it kind of come about, and what was kind of the first AI product or project that make you really think, wow, this could be a real business?
Yeah, great question. So maybe quickly on in terms of what we do, and then I can get into some of the origin story and maybe where we're trying to take this as well. Our firm is an AI services company. What that means in plain English is that we'll help organizations to be able to figure out what to build and then be their team to be able to build it. We'll end up doing kind of two main service offerings. One is some level of discovery or strategy consulting. That is, let's say 4 weeks, meet with the executive team. We also send out voice agents to be able to interview other members of their team. That all that data gets distilled down into just process mapping, taking a look at their entire business, and then from there we give recommendations in terms of where they could be able to implement AI to be able to help solve some of the bottlenecks across like that process. And once we and also frame up the ROI, et cetera, of like where to get going. And then after that, we usually do one of three things. One is either enablement, the second is education, the third one is engineering. Enablement is where like most of our business is growing today. The way we define that is instead of building more custom and like products, we're actually just implementing off the shelf platforms. So we became like a Claude partner about a month ago. We're recommending like other kind of off the shelf customer service agents at the moment. We could also implement like codecs and other harnesses. But you can imagine that there's a ton of work to be done to be able to actually, either help a customer procure the stuff or once they procured it, be able to help build on top of it. And so it's just interesting to see how much that is shifting, and I can go into that. The second one is education. That's what it sounds like, but still a lot of really easy wins in terms of how to be able to teach people how to use this stuff. And the third one is like, if you need it, we can also do more custom engineering. Like, we're working with the health services firm in Indianapolis to be able to build a computer vision system. Claude can't do that yet, and so we'll end up, building something custom for them too. So it's been a crazy ride. Work with organizations like Netflix and Pepsi and building out voice agents for them. Most of our business is coming from financial services today, whether hedge funds, private equity firms, or portcos, and so can kind of touch on that as well. The original hypothesis of like why this business. We while I was at LinkedIn, I was there on their BD team and was helping them to be able to scale their verification effort. And as I was doing that, I got plugged into the broader Microsoft ecosystem in terms of what was going on in AI at the time. This is the summer of 22. There was all this buzz around like the startup called OpenAI. I had friends who had worked there, and they were kind of giving me some interesting learnings in terms of all the stuff that they're doing. So felt I was like, wow, this is going to be pretty interesting. And off the side of my desk, with a couple friends, we had built a Chrome extension that just helped users to summarize content easily, using I think like I don't even know if it was like GPT 3.5 at that time. It actually launched. It launched like a week after ChatGPT. Those two products have gone in different directions in terms of a growth trajectory. But that Chrome extension got up to 20,000 users and 1,000 daily active users, and within like a month of building, and it was a good learning of wow. There's clearly like a lot of demand here, and I didn't have the confidence to be able to say, hey, like this is the vertical AI product I want to go build and like go to YC and go raise a bunch of money and go get after this. And so I was more like, maybe instead of going vertical, we can help other companies to be able to do this work. And that was the original kind of hypothesis. I can go into more detail. But yeah, that kind of taught me that there was like some value here. And we've been on that journey since.
That's awesome. A lot of like great nuggets in there and learnings to distill. I think the most interesting piece just on that last part was how you kind of went down the path of the agency studio model essentially, versus kind of, I don't know, building out more products yourself and kind of fundraising or doubling down on a specific product. I feel like today, like there's
Hmm.
this glorification of startups and going into YC or going to accelerator and building a massive business, raising capital. But you kind of really doubled down on the services model. What kind of opportunity did you really see on that front? And how did you kind of come to that decision that you're like, no, we really see the opportunity as more of this consulting engagement, and
Yeah.
how do you kind of build out that three-pronged framework of where you're really going to plug in?
There's been different eras to it in my thinking. I think the way I would define it is like why like how we got started and what the thinking was then. I think maybe like let's fast forward like a year and a half to maybe like last year and like how we like started to realize like wow, there's actually like a really near term or like a really big opportunity in just like implementing AI. And then I think now moving forward, my ambition has just like grown even more in terms of like what the opportunity looks like. And I think it's important to kind of, I didn't really necessarily want to start this thing to go build like a bajillion-dollar company, but now it's like, wow, actually, you could go do that. Let's go do that.
Yeah.
But I think the progression of thinking is helpful to talk through because it just, I don't know, I try to be as pragmatic as possible about all this stuff. I think the very original hypothesis of like why services versus maybe like vertical and like VC back versus like we've been bootstrapping the business. Yeah, like we should be hitting like an 8-figure run rate like at some point this year. And so the I was inspired by like people who had maybe like talked about this stuff before of like, hey, like you should build a cash flow generating business, like you can bootstrap it up to whatever K per month and you can live a great lifestyle because of it. So I was like, yeah, that sounds pretty cool. And so it was inspired by Greg Eisenberg and Cody Schneider and this like other offshoot of the internet that speaks a lot about this stuff, and they've since kind of become advisors and friends and everything, which has been fun. That was the original perspective of it. It's like what's the less risky but still entrepreneurial thing to go tackle. And my mind, I think my mind is more kind of focused on like a diverse amount of stuff versus like one specific problem statement. And I even had a friend at OpenAI when I was trying to figure out like, hey, like, should I go vertical? Should I go services? We had just built this Chrome extension. It was like, we have some people using this thing. Maybe we just go really deep on that. And thankfully he's like one of my best friends and he's like, you're not a product founder. You're like, you're like a services guy. And like, at the time, uh, living in San Francisco, you feel like that's like like an attack on you. But I think he knew me well, and he knew that that was like kind of where my superpowers were, and it was a good. And he also spoke to like how much demand there's going to be of like integrating these models into
Yeah.
organizations, and so he kind of gave me that insight and pushed me to that, and so that was the original kind of thinking. Is like the cash flow generating businesses sound pretty cool. The services model is a good way to do that. It seems to be like some demand in terms of like applying that to AI at the moment. And that was like the original kind of hypothesis. It's since shifted a little bit and gotten broader in ambition, but I can pause there for a second.
Yeah, it's again super interesting how you kind of came to that decision, because ultimately, from my perspective, I think there was this, I don't call it like a near death experience, but people were ultimately so negative on consulting as really like a profession. They were like, oh, okay, ultimately it's going to be automated away. And then now you see not just folks like yourself who are doing it so well from an integration and building perspective, but even a lot of these bigger shops, the Bains of, McKinsey's of the world, that are now actually having a second life as really
Yeah.
implementation consultants and kind of thought partners on what AI implementation actually looks like for these massive organizations. So that's a whole fascinating separate conversation in and of itself. But I think just for the purposes of today, I would love to kind of hear more about the three legs of the stool of the offerings that you guys are looking at. So you talked a
Mhm,
little bit about kind of the broad license that you get to kind of go into your clients,
mhm,
interview the executive team, talk to folks using voice agents. What are you seeing in the market? Like, what does AI adoption actually look like? Because I think
mhm.
hear all these stories about, we're in the early innings, but then in San Francisco, at least you can feel behind if you're not using like 20 different AI tools at the same time. So, what are you
Yeah.
seeing with clients that you're working with, and what's kind of the adoption curve and interest level looking like with the folks that you talk to?
Yeah, it's shifting every month, right? As you can imagine, I think my perspective on it even a quarter ago would be a little bit different. I think now the state of play that we're seeing is that everybody knows that they need this. Some organizations have been a little bit slower than others to adopt. Most organizations are either at the stage where they've like, they have like a really large license, like a bunch of licenses of Microsoft Copilot, and they're trying to figure out can they be valuable? Can it be valuable for them? A lot of them have started to procure Claude, and they're starting to kind of like build out these skill files and MD files, but like they don't know how to make it like productionized and actually like drive adoption of those tools. And then I think another set of organizations, they may have gone down this path where the harnesses were not good enough. Let's say they started in earnest like this time last year, AI is a top priority. The way to the way to build the products is now actually completely different in terms of like what we recommend to folks. So I think those are the kind of the three buckets of companies we end up chatting with. We have people that are like, let's say they're just Copilot licenses. You have people that have procured Claude and they're lost. You have people that are or Codex, but mostly Claude. And then you have another bucket that they've already been down this like AI journey, but they kind of feel the same level of loss, but they're like spent more money. And now they're like, and now across all three of them, they're all like, what do we do?
Yeah.
And I think it's really interesting. So everybody is kind of at the same place.
I'm curious,
And
who do you like of those three buckets? Like, who do you like working with the most? Like, where do they? It feels like the
mm,
last one maybe they're more slightly more at an inflection point, whereas the first is maybe like completely blank slate. You're like, okay,
yeah,
what do we even do?
they like I think like all I love working with all three. I think if they've already kind of made the decision to be able to procure Claude, for example, or they're kind of like re coming back to the point that they shouldn't be building this like crazy big like custom build thing, they're also coming back to Claude or another harness, right? It'll change, but they're choosing a harness versus like choosing a custom software build, right? So they're both kind of at the same place. And I think the third one is getting there too, right? Like they're not far behind. Uh, there might be another couple of weeks or a month behind. So I guess like the funny reality I hadn't thought about this is like they're all kind of at the same place. Either you haven't done anything and now you're about to do it, or you've just started like using this stuff and you're kind of like confused in terms of its value, or you've built some crazy big custom build and you're back around to like thinking through what the actual like real application of this stuff is. And this one's the hardest one for the company because they've already been burned a little bit. Not because I think they've been burned, not because there's necessarily like some like nefarious actors or anything. I think the space is moving really fast. And so something that we would even recommend to our clients a year ago is totally different now in terms of how to actually implement this stuff, right? Um, and so we like working with all of them. I think the second and the second and the third one are probably a little bit easier to be able to kind of move on and we'll move probably a little bit faster.
That makes sense. And like you said, things are evolving so quickly that ultimately all three, things are rapidly shifting that they could be in a totally different place in a quarter or half a year. One of the interesting things I just want to double click on, we talked a little bit about this in the pre-show, but you mentioned how private equity is becoming a major source of
Mhm.
interest as they try and think about what their portfolio AI implementation strategy looks like and how they kind of think about
Mhm.
margin enhancement. Walk me
Yeah.
through kind of your engagement there and how that maybe has been structured relative to some of your other clients that are kind of coming on board.
Yeah. I think like I think the promise of if you're building a business and you're thinking about how to grow it, you want to go chat with people that ideally could give you access to more customers than not. And like that comes from like a lot of my BD kind of background and thinking is like how do we access like a channel versus like just going direct. And so um private equity in my mind has always been like this like elusive like, oh, I think that might be that thing. um I think through a couple of like really key partnerships with other like AI services companies that we really look up to and we partner with a lot, both informally and formally. Like they've also kind of taught me a little bit more about the stuff. Like the team at Fractional, for example, is awesome. They really focus on private equity, and so they've been even just like publicly like reading about their case studies and stuff. There's been a lot, and then also we have a really good relationship just generally. So they were kind of the ones that have been moving really aggressively on this stage and taught me a lot. Um, I think like what's going on right now in private. So for those who aren't familiar, it's like all these funds own these like portfolio companies. Some of them have like smaller stakes in them, maybe more analogous to like a VC fund, but others will also have like full like majority ownership of them. And so partnering with these funds to deploy your product or services through them, the ability to actually like get in the door and have like some influence if you developed a good relationship with their partners is like it could work pretty well because they're like, hey, like here's like a really good recommendation for a firm to go work with. And so what I've noticed is like over the past 8 months or so, I think like as I've been chatting with a lot of these operating partners, both from like pretty large cap funds, but also like smaller funds, everybody's been kind of just, like a little bit like mid adopters, like not late adopters, but they're like, what's the ROI? Like, what's the ROI? And so the conversation effectively like was dying for most people there. I think over the past 3 weeks, literally like last month, the dialogue has shifted completely um, to what's the ROI to like I need you to talk to like five portcos like tomorrow. I need to like work. They need to start. They need help like starting like in 3 weeks, right? So it's pretty intense actually.
Wow.
And I think a lot of that is because of like the news around like Blackstone, Anthropic, and like what they're doing, as well as like OpenAI and like their funds. And so I think that's now like everybody's now saying, well, what's our thing, right? And yeah, and I think also because of Claude and because of these harnesses, like the cost of implementing this stuff has also gone down a lot. And I don't think a lot of like services firms or whatever have a good incentive to actually like educate folks on that sometimes. You can get to a lot of value by just like procuring Claude, building skills, like and having their team use those things pretty quickly. So we've always taken the stance of like let's just kind of like cut the bullshit and like let's just get to like value faster because like we can continue to build the relationships longer term. So I think yeah, it's like the market generally is ready. The technology has gotten to a stage where it's not that expensive, as expensive to be able to actually implement this stuff, and it's faster to deploy it. And so I think all of those kind of pieces are moving to like they're like really ready to go.
Yeah,
So yeah, it's been really interesting.
that's awesome. Yeah, it sounds like to your point, a lot of, and this is the case across a whole host of different topics on AI, but a lot of like market reaction, like the Blackstone announcement and, folks
Hmm.
realizing what's happening and ultimately not wanting to be left behind. And there's a lot of FOMO in terms of kind of how aggressive they are. I just want to switch gears just really briefly to the second part of the stool. I think you talked a lot about education. And I think that is a really interesting angle because I've seen so many different folks try uh, different ways to get in front of explanations on things as simple as how to use Claude Cowork all the way through to what the best way to implement a large scale enterprise transformation for AI is. So
Yeah.
I talked to John Colliker last week, who was talking about how Leland is helping people up level from like an AI skill builder perspective. I talked to James Raybold, who I know you have been doing some building sessions with. Like,
Hmm.
what have you seen work, and what would you recommend to some of these listeners, either people who are newer to AI or even people who are more advanced? Like, how should they be getting up to speed and thinking about like just becoming AI builders in this new age when things are evolving so quickly?
This stuff is super hard. And like I think anybody that, has like the silver bullet answer, like, it's not true. Like it's not what we see, right? And we're getting paid by companies to come in and like teach people how to do this stuff. And it's like every time it's like there's always like it's always really hard, right? So I'll explain why it's really hard first, and then we can talk about solutions to it.
Okay.
I think the first thing is like, and maybe like the problem statements can lead to like a way to be able to actually tackle this. Like the first one is everybody at an organization is kind of, and I'll share the lens of like a company relationship, but it's applicable for just individuals too, where let's say you're getting brought into like, uh, we just work with like, like $100 billion, value company. And like, we're helping their innovation team use, Claude and Cowork and stuff and Copilot. The first issue was like, what do you teach? Right. Well, it depends on what they do. Right. You don't want like it's less valuable at this point to be like, here's Claude, here's Codex. Like, who cares? Like, you can go to YouTube and figure it out. It's more valuable to first like figure out like what they do every day, and then maybe build them some stuff and to like solve those problems, and then teach them how you did that. Right. As like the first like step. So the first problem is like, how do you even know what to teach people? And the way to tackle that is by like doing some level of discovery to figure out what their job even looks like, so you can focus on like building something and then showing them how you built something in that space. The second one is like, the other hard part is that everybody has their own kind of like variance in terms of how much they've gone into it, right? Some people have like OpenClaw running on their own personal device that just like runs their life, right? And like they're kind of sheepish to like talk about it in their companies. Other people have only like, drafted an email using Copilot, right? And both could be doing their job still really well, even if they're not using AI aggressively, frankly. The person who does only drafted an email using Copilot could be the biggest, like the best seller in the company. And like, who cares, right? If they're not using AI. But the person who's doing the OpenClaw stuff is actually not, doing their job correctly, and like they're wasting a bunch of time using AI stuff. So so I think like the first thing is like, how do you know what to teach them? You have to do some level of discovery for that. And then the second one is like making sure you're teaching folks like where they're at. And I think it goes to the third, I guess, like solution, which is like you just need to go really narrow in terms of like teaching people. It needs to be very hands-on. I would segment it to be like, we're only focusing on the innovation team. We're only focusing on people that need this specific workflow done first, because we think that's going to be the most valuable thing. And we're only going to teach people that are not up to speed yet, or teach people that are really up to speed to kind of get them to the next level. So all this stuff needs to be customized based off of the organization, the people, the maturity of it. And that's why it's really hard. Like one blanket approach to this stuff like never lands for anybody. It's like you're either too simple for the complicated people, or you're too complicated for the simple people. It's just like, it's very difficult. So I guess like the headline is like the best way to do it is to do it as like just like teaching. It's like teaching like children how to do something. Like it's better if it's like a really small group of people, and it's not like a 200 person lecture. It's really hands on. You maybe show them how to do stuff. Like you watch them do it, you teach them how to do it better, right? So it's maybe not overly complex, but it's hard to scale that still, for most people today. So I don't even know if I've given any tips or tricks or anything, but that's how I've been thinking about it.
No, that's super helpful. I think the thing that I've heard as a common theme in all of the conversations that you really highlighted there is the necessity of being hands on, right? Like
Hmm.
just trying things and actually implementing things is the critical way to learning what works and what doesn't. I think so many people are trying to watch YouTube videos or trying to listen to lectures, and it just really doesn't do the trick. I think,
Yeah.
as you and James have showed, like it is so easy to just start something.
Hmm.
If you have an idea, like go out, try and build it, whether it's using Codex or Claude or uh, whatever it may be. Like I think there is a real opportunity now that building is really no longer the bottleneck to try and learn quickly, and that iteration is critical.
Yeah. 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 Exactly. And I think tactically, it's like learning, like let's say I want to automate a workflow for myself, like what I would do is I would ask like Claude to like interview me a little bit, to discern out what I even do, because sometimes I don't even know what I really do. Honestly, it's like most people don't know most people don't even understand their process and what they may not even have one, right?
Yeah.
And so you're like, Claude, please email me, please like interview me, discern out what I even do. Ask me like where I spend most of my time. Ask me like, where I waste a lot of my energy. Um, Ask me like, or tell me like what are some opportunities like lever to be able to leverage AI, and then start to build it for me, right? And so then it could start to create. Let's say I spend a lot of time drafting up proposals for customers. And then it can give me ideas of like, well, why don't you maybe create some automation that can pull the transcript, create a proposal for you? It's like, oh, that's cool. How do I do that? And you can kind of like interview yourself as a person. It gets more complex when you get into organizations because there's a lot of moving pieces and people, but you know, even our voice agents and stuff like that tries to help augment a lot of that work. But then yeah, and then I think just try to learn how to develop these things on the harnesses, I think is like the main TLDR. Because like I think like the idea of like defining skills, MD files, like this stuff will be really transferable. I think, regardless of like which platform we're using. I think that it's just like at the end of the day, you're just learning how to create like a document, right? uh, like that feels to be the most like primitive piece here that won't change. Maybe probably it will change still, but um, it's like teaching someone how to write a Google Doc or something or a Microsoft Word thing. It's like let's learn that skill because I think that skill might be transferable for folks versus like learning how to use Vercel over I don't know, like some another platform. But yeah, that those are some thoughts at least.
Well, I think the call out you made about just like distilling the jobs to be done is
Hmm.
super interesting because I think to your point, like people don't even internalize how many micro steps there are in what they do from a day to day. And AI
Hmm.
is really excellent at kind of distilling that process. And you need to understand that before you can even automate it. I had
Hmm.
Claude interview me about some of my day to day workflows, and really just even understanding what I was
Hmm.
doing was an
Doing, yeah,
eye-opening.
yeah,
And then from there, you're able to kind of figure out like what actually needs to be automated and what doesn't. So
yep,
um,
yep.
I'm fully with you. Um, awesome. And I know we have to wrap up here, but Jay, this is really awesome. I think a lot of good takeaways for me here in terms of where the state of play is from an enterprise adoption perspective, what education looks like, and just how people can get started. I think feels really core to what this whole podcast and conversation is about. The tools are getting easier. The bar for taste, focus, execution, education is getting higher. So,
Hmm.
for everyone listening, you can find Jay on LinkedIn, and you can check out Casper Studios to see more about what they're building. So, Jay, thank you so much. Thanks for coming on. Appreciate the time.
Thanks, man.